This is the Khmer Times News. My name is Paolo Bonini, and these are your headlines. A tycoon is to be jailed for 2 brutal murders. An anti-drug police officer is busted for buying drugs. And we have a whole lineup of senior officials falling foul of the law as the government's corruption clampdown continues. But firstly, it's our headline story. Now, when I first read this story, I had a real issue just comprehending how someone could feel so very entitled that they thought shooting an innocent couple in public was acceptable. The man at the centre of the storm is a tycoon and an honoured member of society who carried the title of Khmer. His name is Srey Sinha, and what he did beggars belief. Now, before I update you on this case, let me quickly remind you what happened previously. The tycoon had had a dispute with his neighbour, and it was all about a mango tree and a washing line. The tycoon felt that the tree encroached on his land. The argument turned heated, and instead of doing the sensible and just cutting off the offending branches of the mango tree, the exceedingly privileged man decided on another course of action. He turned away from the argument, he then walked into his house, and he went to a cabinet. He then retrieved a loaded handgun. He returned to his neighbour's house, and in the driveway he gunned down the man he was arguing with. The victim was shot multiple times, and he died right there on the floor. He was just 27 years old. Now, if that is not bad enough, the dead man's 25-year-old girlfriend heard the shots and she rushed to her lover's side. And the gunman, who seemed to experience no shock at all at killing a man, he then did the unthinkable. He levelled his gun at the innocent young woman and he killed her as well. The pure arrogance and cold-hearted nature of these slayings set the internet alight. Another rich, entitled man breaking the law, thinking he was untouchable, was a very common comment. But the gunman was to face the full force of the law, as this week the Justice Minister said that he himself would resign his position if the accused man was not found guilty and received a jail term. He said, "I want to confirm that if this person is not convicted of felony murder, I will not work in the field of law and justice anymore." He added, the tycoon will also go on a blacklist and will never get a pardon or have his sentence commuted. Now, this is very much the power of social media on display. The uproar and outrage that a man who was a member of a privileged class could think that he could do whatever he wanted was his downfall, as the nation's protests sent shockwaves through the legal system. For a justice minister to not only guarantee a guilty verdict, but then also offer to resign his position is unheard of. And it very clearly shows that when the people raise their voices and speak up against such outrages of justice, it is not only delivered swiftly, it is also guaranteed. On this week's Crime Desk, it's oops, oh dear, and oops again, as an anti-drug officer gets busted for buying drugs. A senior official is caught taking hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes, and a deputy chief is questioned for money laundering. So here is a story, and the headline is really quite remarkable. Have a look at this for a headline. Anti-drug unit officer arrested for drugs purchase. Yep, it's time to suspend your disbelief, as an officer of the law who was attached to the anti-drug unit was in fact arrested for buying drugs. Oh dear. A serving Phnom Penh police officer from the anti-drug unit has now been questioned after it is alleged he brought narcotics from a drug dealer. It was in fact on November the 9th that a drug task force arrested a 17-year-old man in Phnom Penh. The police officers seized from him 4 packages of drugs. Now, after the arrest, in the hope of getting some kind of deal from the arresting officers for a lighter sentence, the drug dealer told the most incredible of stories. He said that he had sold packages of drugs to a police officer. This got those arresting officers' attention very swiftly, and following this incredible confession, the anti-drug task force then arrested a 42-year-old drug enforcement officer named Sreng Wuti. Now, we have no further statement from the drug squad, but what we do know at current is this case is undergoing further investigation. This week, our lead story I opened with was all about a privileged member of society that held the title of Khmer, a very prestigious title indeed. But surprisingly, yet again, there was another member of this elite band in the news this week, as police are seeking to arrest Khmer Mr. Samrong. He has gone on the run after being accused of offering bribes to secure very senior political positions, including Deputy Governor of Prasad Province and the Governor of Kandal Province. The alleged offences occurred between September 2023 and January of this year. The Deputy Chief of Internal Security said that this week that Mr. Samrong had been on the run since he heard that Lee Samat and Dung Dara, both former Prime Minister Hun Sen advisors, had been arrested in connection with fraud and the proffering of bribes. The officer went on to say that according to police investigation, the Deputy Governor of Prasad Province offered a bribe of over $500,000 to Mr. Samrong in order to secure his position as the governor of Kampong Speu Province. And in another case, the governor of Liv Em district paid $300,000 to Mr. Samrong. Now, the question that raises its head is why? Why such vast amounts of money for a government post that pays not an overly impressive salary? Well, these corrupt men had only one aim: to grab a position of power so they could use it for extortion and bribery, to not only get their investment back, but also so much more. And by arresting these men, it has saved an awful lot of people from suffering the abuse of power they would have carried out. So these arrests are truly very significant. The accused men are now in jail, and if convicted, they face prison sentences ranging from 5 to 10 years for each case. Incredibly, this week has seen a deluge of corruption cases, and there is even more abuse of power in this next story, as the Anti-Corruption Unit has arrested 2 Takao provincial officials for the abuse of power. The accused in this case are the Director of Planning of Takao and a Deputy Chief. They are both suspected of not only illegal acts in public administration, but also they stand accused of money laundering for 7 long years. Now, we need to pause right here, just for a moment, and review our stories this week to see a much wider picture. Because what we have is an awful lot of abuse of power. In fact, our entire crime desk is overflowing with people in higher positions thinking they can abuse those positions. First, we told of the drug enforcement officer who stands accused of buying drugs. Then our next story was a member of the elite on the run due to bribery charges. And our final story just now involved senior officials charged with both corruption and money laundering. Now, that's not so good, is it? I mean, an entire crime desk this week just saturated with senior officials who are not serving the people, but serving themselves. But guess what? There was more stories along a similar vein this week, and I have not even told you about them. Stories like this one. Another tycoon and former official was arrested by anti-corruption unit for very inappropriate behaviour. And in yet another headline, it states that a senior army officer has been arrested in drug-related crimes. Now, do remember, all these stories have appeared in just 1 week, and it's easy to look on and think this seems to never end. But the truth is, it has a very defined ending indeed. And the anti-corruption squad is now arresting and jailing many more men who think they can do whatever they want due to their privileged rank or their privileged position. But these arrogant men are learning all too quickly that the central government is hunting them down and jailing them. And there is one very simple reason. Economies that allow corruption and nepotism always fail. Corruption and graft are the cancer of a healthy economy. All you need to prove that is to throw a dart at a map in the direction of Africa and see what happened in that country. Africa is the poster child of how corruption utterly wrecks economies. Corruption destroys nations like no other disease, and oh so often they never ever recover from it. So it may seem that things are very bad, but these ongoing arrests are in fact the cure for an ill that, if it's not dealt with, could destroy a nation's finances. So let's all agree we've had enough of corrupt officials being busted for 1 week. In fact, it is these stories that did dominate the press for the past 7 days. And here is another reason why Cambodia needs to get financially fit, as the kingdom is now scheduled to graduate from being a least developed country. And that's due to happen by 2029. And that indeed is a very big deal, as foreign investment in the country has soared to $5 billion. Now, what we need to remember is the country was completely crushed by civil war. The Khmer Rouge, as a percentage, killed more of its citizens than any other genocide in the entire history of man. Approximately 25% of all Cambodians were killed. And this is all in living memory. The nation was literally taken back to year zero. So it is, in fact, a huge achievement that this week Cambodia and the UN released a policy brief on Cambodia's graduation from least developed country status. And that could be achieved, as I say, by 2029. The paper noted the potential loss of international support for preferential market access, as GDP may well slow by up to 1.5%, and there could be 165,000 potential job losses, particularly among women working in the garment sector. Also, nearly 500,000 people are at risk of falling into poverty. Now, all of that is very scary, because a big financial support crutch will be taken away, and leaving the classification of an LDC is very much like taking the training wheels off a kid's bicycle. And the country will now have to freewheel along the road unsupported. But far outweighing any transactional anxiety, surely, is the pride in the fact that Cambodia is breaking through into being a fully developed nation that can proudly stand on its own 2 feet and look other nations in the eye with an equal stance. That old Cambodia, so weak and so fragile, will soon be something for the history books, as now a strong and resilient kingdom is emerging from the ashes of one of the worst civil wars the world has ever seen. And that surely is something for a nation to be very proud of. It's time to have a look ahead and see what the weather has in store for us next week.
And here we are, the last page of the book for this week, and that, of course, is the weather. But as always, I like to show you a photo of my week just to make the weather a bit more interesting. And have a look at this. This is the Royal Albert Hall in London. It seats 5,000 people. So why am I showing it to you? Well, my YouTube channel now, which you may know about, World's Forgotten Temples, where I'm Mr. B the Temple Man, gets 5,000 viewers a month, and I cannot tell you how elated I am. I honestly would have been happy with 40 people a month, you know, Village Hall being filled up, but to fill the Royal Albert Hall every month, well, that's just crazy land, but it fills my heart with joy. So yet again, another merry picture. But is the weather as merry? Well, let's have a look. And it is. Hurrah! Basically, the sun is coming out. It is getting hotter. There's no two ways about it. Humidity is up in the 60s or 70s, and your highest temperature will be 34 degrees.
This has been the Khmer Times News. Please do subscribe and comment and stay up to date with all the breaking news by following us on both Facebook and Telegram. This has been Paolo Bonini, and that was the week that was. I'll see you next weekend for your weekly Roundup.